Hey everyone, it's me, HawkeyeG, with another faction introduction video. Having done the Empire factions, I kind of want to do Lizardmen next, Hexoatl being a natural choice to start with. The Lizardmen are the other Order faction in the base game of Total War Warhammer II, so this is what I wanted to do next. I've done a faction overview for this faction before, but I do kind of want to bring this one more in line with my recent guide series and just do a refreshed one for the current state of Warhammer 2 anyway, since we are basically at the end phase here and there's not going to be any more updates. If you are enjoying these videos, please remember to like and subscribe. It always helps the channel and I really do appreciate it. With these faction introduction videos, I always talk about the bonuses the faction gets, which might include things like climate differences or unique rights if they're worth mentioning, the legendary lord of the faction, so what their unique traits, skills, and items are, and then the unique mechanics that the faction may have separate from other factions of their race. So, with that being said, let's get into the video. So, we will start with the faction bonuses that Hexoatl gets. I'll just pull these bonuses up here where we can see it. I do think these bonuses are pretty straightforward, but it makes sense because they're, like the primary faction for the race, and of course one included in the base game, so you're not going to see, crazy specialization most of the time. If we look at the first one, diplomatic relations -10 with no factions. Kind of a weird one, pretty self-explanatory. Obviously it's a penalty, not a bonus. People just dislike you a little bit more. Frankly though, you don't actually have that much trouble making friends with any natural allies like other high elves or lizardmen. This is not the diplomacy page. You can see I've got good relations with some of the nearby high elves, some of the lizardmen, so it doesn't really hurt you that much with the people that matters. I know that on higher difficulty, even the smallest amounts can count, and you do see that reflected in this campaign, but in general, it's just kind of interesting. It does mean you have to play maybe a little bit more defensive and passive, but that really is the Lizardmen style anyway. And you have a powerful spellcaster in Mazdamundi, but we'll get to that later. The next one is the construction cost for Star Chambers building. So this one's actually pretty cool. 50% construction cost is a big deal. And so you can see it says 3,000. That means that this should have cost me 6,000, right? Which is a pretty decent chunk of change. You can see the Weapons Crafter Commune costs 6,000, right? It's an interesting building. I would say you primarily use it to increase Hero and Lord recruit rank. With enough of these, you can actually get this recruit rank pretty high, and they're actually available to build in minor settlements as well. Not something you'll probably invest into heavily until late game. And the thing is, in late game, you're probably not really going to need the extra cash. So is the construction cost bonus, like the construction cost reduction, that good? I don't know, but it's still a nice bonus to have, and especially once you clear kind of the early game phase, it's a really good thing that you can use. Once your economy stabilizes, you're building up a little bit, you can use it to then start producing higher level lords and heroes quite easily, right? The last bonus we have is the right cost reduction. Again, another simple one. All the rights that you have cost less. It's pretty great for everything. Obviously, right? Whether it's keeping steady uptimes on some of the less expensive rituals, and making them more accessible to you, or perhaps pulling Primeval Glory maybe a little earlier than you might want to into in a typical campaign, because it costs a little bit less, so it's not gonna take as much money off of you, and it would give you access to, especially the Carnosaurs, right, is what you want. The Stegodon and Bastillodon, not as important, but even if I could replace some of my units, it's a good way to kind of get some dinosaurs early on in your campaign, and when you might not otherwise have access to them. And so, of course, the cost reduction helps there. I don't really think there's any super special strategies other than that for use with this bonus, though. And besides that, there isn't really a lot of special things to say. There's some solid bonuses, of course, except for the one penalty. But aside from that, they're quite standard as far as Lizardmen factions go. You're not really seeing bonuses to a specific unit. You're not necessarily seeing the only real specific one is the Star Chamber building, right? Other than that, you don't have an affinity for other factions or a penalty for specific factions. You don't have an affinity for any specific units, stuff like that. But that's just the faction bonus that we're talking about here. So with that being said, let's go and look at the Legendary Lord next and see what his traits, items, and skills look like. So, our Lord for this campaign is Mazdamundi. The main highlights here is that he's a very powerful and fairly diverse spellcaster, okay? He has essentially no campaign type skills, and it really only has one single bonus for anything like army or unit composition related, right? That means you're going to have some really great options for focusing on his individual power, but obviously not as much really for anything else. So I'll start by going through the bonuses he gets from his unique trait. He's got a lot of bonuses here, but they're actually some pretty good ones. So the first one is the miscast base chance minus 50%. Now, this is actually a very interesting one. If you didn't already know, the base miscast chance for anything is 50%. Or it should be 50%. I must have something else equipped here. Interesting. Anyway, yeah, base miscast chance for any overcast spell is 50%. So having a miscast base chance reduction of 50% means that you will never miscast an overcast spell unless there's, other underlying conditions with other weapons or items, maybe skills that the enemy hero has, stuff like that. So as long as there's no other detrimental effects, it means you're guaranteed a successful overcast as Mazdamundi. No personal damage, not bad, right? The unit experience gain per turn, that's pretty self-explanatory. Honestly, it's a low enough value that I don't really think it's that important. The Winds of Magic power reserve is plus 40. For reference, the default Winds of Magic bonus increase on like Lords and Heroes is 15, right? It means that Mazdamundi can cast more spells and will regenerate Winds of Magic faster. It can be especially useful in areas where the Winds of Magic are low, or again where your enemy may have like skills or an active right or items, etc. to deplete it. Okay. Then the last one that we have here, upkeep minus 50% for Temple Guards units. Literally the only bonus that Mazdamundi gets for army-related business. Technically, an item of his we'll look at helps the army, but it's not a specific bonus for a specific unit. And it's kind of an interesting bonus here. Mazdamundi is a spellcaster and not really as melee focused, so it's a cool concept to get him some cheaper bodyguards. That being said, if we're talking about Temple Guards, they are the third weakest of the base game's elite halberd infantry units, right? Talking about Blackguard of Nagaron for the Dark Elves, we're talking about Phoenix Guard for the High Elves, and then Storm Vermin for the Skaven. Of course, those are essentially unlocked at the appropriate tier to represent their overall power in comparison to one another. But basically, what I'm trying to say is, while this is a nice unit, it's not exactly their all-star unit, and it's generally more of a supporting unit to other units in their roster. So it would be the most effective in the mid-game, but you might not have many in your army's late game. So how much is this cost the upkeep reduction really offsetting things for you? Infantry just isn't really the Lizardmen's specialty outside of most early game like Saurus and Skink units. And then even in the mid game where you'd be using Temple Guard the most, there's still typically a lot of other things that you're bringing that are going to have more value, or just that the Temple Guard without that other units to, like having cavalry for rear charging or something, or having like artillery type units to snipe the back lines, without those units, or even like flying units to do damage, right? Without something like that, the Temple Guard alone aren't really going to carry you through a battle, right? So it's a nice bonus, and of course it, depending on the difficulty you're playing on, it can be, you can cruise through a lot of stuff on like normal difficulty with just like Saurus warriors and eventually Temple Guard, and don't get me wrong, they're still a great unit for the things that they're supposed to do. But yeah, it's just not the perfect bonus, or perhaps not the perfect thing for the Lizardmen in current state. But that's plenty of talk about Temple Guards. It really is a smaller piece of the picture here. It's just that it's the last piece of Mazdamundi's trait. That means we'll talk about his items next. So, in his items page, we really only have the two unique items for him, okay? The Sunburst Standard, not terribly complicated, short list of bonuses here. It is a pretty powerful defensive banner. I would say it's best either used on Mazdamundi or another spellcaster when setting up a defensive position for a battle, or else used on like a Saurus Scar Veteran or a Skink Chief Hero to help assist the frontline attacking units, right? The missile resistance could be really good when you're charging your first few frontline units in, where even if they have the shields, then they still take a little bit less damage, and especially if you're talking frontline fighters, course, having that extra melee defense can be good. It also means that if you have it, then you could take this attack rather than defend trade-off, where some of the units in the area would then have a pretty nice bonus, like an overall bonus of 7 melee attack and 3 melee defense with the effects of that banner. It's kind of cool. Yeah, like otherwise, you know, this would pair pretty well with Temple Guard. It would make them even more difficult to kill. And just in general, can be used by a spellcaster as kind of a defensive AoE bonus as well. As for the Cobra Mace of Mazdamundi, it's an interesting item. It's got a variety of bonus. The 50% magic item chance to steal, like 50%'s a big number, right? So especially that coupled with maybe even a single additional Skink Priest in your army, that's going to give you a pretty high chance of capturing an item in almost every battle. So it can be very useful. Then, of course, you get some melee stats, right? I just said previously, Mazdamundi isn't really specialized in being a melee character, and yet here this item gives him poison attacks, weapon strength increase, and melee attack increase. Now, if you do get him on his mount, he can actually be a pretty competent melee fighter. He's definitely not going to be... Like, the thing is that he has the spells that he needs to support himself to be a successful melee fighter. He's not really a great, like, pure melee character, but it is nice to have that kind of survivability. I don't know that it's exactly what you want, right? Compare it to, like, some of the unique items on Techless, and it pales in comparison. And then, of course, the last piece being that Untainted bonus. 5 is a pretty nice value to have on this. Untainted maybe isn't your top priority, but in a way, that's why it's nice to have it added on to an item like this, right? Then you don't have to invest skill points into any other characters or even into this lord in order to get that Untainted bonus. And it does kind of depend on who you're facing off against. If you're facing off against other Untainted factions, it's totally pointless. But yeah, so like I said, you know, even though he's a powerful spellcaster, his items don't really reflect that or give him very big bonuses for that. It's kind of nice then you can add him to your melee front line and use him as like a semi-offensive hero while still getting a lot of spells casted. So that's kind of nice. But aside from that, these items are alright, but they're not too crazy. Maybe not essential, but of course nice to have. The last thing I would normally talk about in this kind of section would be his unique skill tree, which he kind of has, but really it's mostly mirrored to any other Slan Lord, where, you know, this isn't quite the same kind of unique skill tree in the style that most other lords have a unique skill tree, right? So Slan Lords themselves, for the Lizardmen, have their own unique skill trees. Mazdamundi does get these 2 extra bonuses on the end, and so I'm going to kind of go through those. He also, of course, has a very unique set of spells for his actual spell tree. So while if I look at something like this, you know, a Fire Slan, they're going to have the typical loadout for fire magic. Mazdamundi actually covers 3 lores of magic, which is the Heavens Mage, the Light Mage, and the High Mage, right? So we have spells from all that. We'll take a look at that in just a second. First thing I want to go through are these top 2 lines, right? They're still pretty interesting, despite the fact that they're not, you know, exactly unique to him. The first line is going to be mostly spellcaster bonuses, right? Winds of Magic increases, enemy winds of magic reduction, a bound spell, this is literally just the banishment spell, but it's bound, so you get free uses of it, and then another bound spell, the Ruination of Cities. So rather than try to explain this, I'm just going to take a brief moment, hop into a battle, and you can kind of see what it does. Based on the explanation a little bit too will help out, but let's just take a look. So, the Ruination of Cities. Major magical damage, wind spell, 3 rifts spread outwards in random directions. Let's just kind of take a look at what that looks like. So you can see it really is random directions. Despite the fact that I pointed it forward, 2 of the shots went backwards. But it does decent damage. I don't know. It's pretty unpredictable. Let's hop back out of this battle and take a look at some other things. So, hopefully that little demonstration kind of helped you understand. I mean, when it says it random launch directions in the description there, it actually means that. It's like fairly powerful, but it's really not that crazy. To be honest, it's not that exciting of a unique skill for him. So it's kind of sad to see, but it's there. It's interesting, and there you have it. The second line in this skill tree is mostly personal skills, right? Technically, there is like a campaign skill in here as well, but I don't want to say it's negligible, but it's not that exciting, right? So we have like a magic resistance skill, a physical resistance skill, miscast base chance reduction, which we don't really need, causes terror and public order increase. Public order is nice. Terror you do get for having the mount though, because stegodons can cause terror. Transcendent healing, which gives you regeneration. Regeneration is nice to have on pretty much anybody in any given situation. Really, I don't know if there's any exceptions to that. And then, yeah, so I mentioned this already. We looked at it, but his unique skill is physical resistance 25%. So this can be kind of a nice tree to go down, especially if you plan on using him in melee a little bit more than maybe you ought to. Getting the regeneration on him, getting the physical resistance. This is going to help him survive in battle quite a bit longer and with a lot less management, right? You're not going to have to heal him as often as you might normally. The miscast base chance, though, is pretty useless. Magic resistance could be nice, but, you know, how much do you really want that? And so, some of these are nice, but overall, I don't know how much it's worth investing heavily into that line. I don't want to call it a waste, but right, it's just more focus on personal skills, and especially the miscast base chance. It's unlikely this is really going to be useful to you. So that's the other. Those are essentially his unique skill trees, right? He doesn't really have like it's really just these two skills. He doesn't really have a special skill tree like most other legendary lords do. The last thing that I want to look at with this set is the actual spells that he has, right? So I've mentioned this. He has spells from 3 different actual disciplines in the game. I won't really go over the spells here. You can find out for yourself what all these do. If you didn't know, we also have the spell browser here that they added to the game, so it's really easy for you to browse the different varieties of spells. But what's something that I want to at least mention here is that we already have this miscast reduction, right? So each of these spells actually has a pretty nice bonus for overcasting, right? These are all semi-situational spells, but the type of bonus that they give them is perfect for the situation you'd use them in. So he has a pretty wide variety of spells for use in different situations, so mostly like buffs, debuffs, right? Like buff, debuff, trap, essentially debuff, right? A heal for your team. These two are damage spells, but that's pretty much it, right? I mean, we also have these spells, but in terms of actual like magic, that's kind of what his roster looks like. So early game, maybe not as much damage, more support role, but you'll be able to get some damage later on. And if you also notice, he also has each of the passive buff from each of the 3 disciplines, right? So the high magic buff, the light magic buff, and the Heaven's Magic buff for whenever you're casting. That has a map-wide effect. It's kind of nice. And then, of course, he has the always-on Arcane Conduit. Other Slan Lords get this as well. So yeah, there's a lot of skills to go through here. Like I said, practically nothing for campaign bonuses, extremely little for army bonuses, and not really that much that's super unique to him. Like the actual skill, spell tree that he has here is unique in and of itself in terms of like what's included in it, but the spells themselves aren't that unique. He has one unique spell. It's kind of terrible. He doesn't have like a unique skill tree that's going to give you something like upkeep and recruitment cost reduction for all units faction wide, or like public order or missile strength increase faction wide, stuff like that. So he doesn't have too crazy of skills. His personal skills are pretty good, though. He's undoubtedly a great spellcaster and can become a decent melee lord. So there's a lot of strengths to him. In a way, it's enough to guide your decisions for the campaign, because instead of kind of choosing like a specific discipline based on what kind of army you want because of the faction bonuses or the lord bonuses, instead of that, you can either go in whatever direction you want to, or you can react to the enemy that you're facing up against, right? As much as it's nice to have like a path that you can go down and get specific bonuses for, not having those bonuses but having a strong spellcaster instead really frees you up to go in more different directions if that's what you're looking to do, right? So that covers everything I want to talk about for the Legendary Lord, which means that it's time to discuss the unique faction mechanics. Now, of course, if you're at all familiar with this race or with this faction, you already know that I don't really have unique mechanics to talk about, right? This is a base game race and faction, so there isn't a whole lot to discuss. You know, normally I would discuss unique mechanics specific to this faction, but since this is the first Lizardmen guide I'm doing, and it is their primary faction, I will talk a little bit about the racial mechanics. Alright, so first up we have the Geomantic web. I don't know much about the lore, essentially just like an energy network using the Earth that travels across different cities. Now you can see on the side here the different strength ratings. What those correlate to is the actual strength of the commandments. So that's what the Geomantic web impacts. It increases the effectiveness of your commandments. You can see here for something basic like growth, public order, and income, just increases by a steady amount all the way through. You can get things like research rate, right? And same thing there. You can get a bunch of like defensive abilities for your territory. And you can, of course, get like recruit rank, weapon strength, recruitment cost reduction. So those are all options there. Now, how do you increase the strength of it? Well, it says here in the menu, right? Strength 1 means that like ruins or enemy settlements are present in the province. Strength 2 is owned and or neutral settlements. Strength rank 3 means you must, so you can see Hexoatl, even though I own all of this, so they're all allied settlements, I don't have the Geomantic pylon built yet. So you do need to have this building built. So it seems like it can be kind of confusing at first, but I think once you get a handle on it, the one important factor that I think you want to understand is this. This second paragraph here, a settlement must be linked to another of equal or higher strength if it is to operate at its maximum potential strength. So that means that you need not one strength 3 with a Geomantic pylon and allied settlements province, but you need 2, right? I need to get the Geomantic pylon built in both of these settlements before either of them will operate at strength rank 3. Right, so what it means is once you have kind of like a really, first of all, you want to get control of 2 or 3 provinces right at the start of the game to be able to kind of start making use of that. It also means that if you already have like a well-built province, that it's worth getting the Geomantic pylon building early in newer provinces to help them develop faster, okay? There's honestly not that much to explain here other than that. Basically, all that clicking the button does is bring up this menu and gives you like a pretty little picture. I mean, it's a nice like visualization to tell at a glance what your Geomantic strength is, but I mean, if you can do a commandment, you can just see it right away. If you can't do a commandment, then what does this even matter? It doesn't have any impact on anything except for commandments, right? But yeah, there's nothing else that you have to do, right? There's no menu that I can go into here for the Geomantic web or activate abilities or do this or that. It's much more of like a passive system. You just have to make the buildings for it. So just some things to think about. But yeah, that's the Geomantic web. There's not too much more to say about it. I think something else worth mentioning is just a brief look at their research tree. While their research requirements aren't as extensive as the High Elves, they still have some in here. The important thing is to recognize that this entire center column and the entire final column are locked behind first acquiring the research at the top of the tree. You can see, well, I can select this, but only because I have this one available to me. You can see this one's locked by a building, require the Star Chamber and the Weapon Crafter Commune. This research is actually locked by the Scrying Pool, which I, of course, have built here, which is allowing me to get this research. But yeah, so you can see you can get these up to this 3rd level, but you can't research anything in the center column until you have the top piece. And after you've researched this top piece, if you want to delete that building, you can, and you'll still retain this research and be able to do these research here in the center. The final feature to mention is the blessed spawnings, right? So you have this mechanic where you can, it's similar to Regiment of Renown, right? Where you can instantly recruit a unit at no cost, and it just has to pay the upkeep for it. You get these from random events, like the one that I've pulled up here. You just, at random, you will get a mission with some kind of standard requirements, which will then unlock a selected unit of blessed spawns for you. So it'll tell you what kind of blessed spawns you'll get, but which ones you'd get, like when does the mission come up each time, what units are you going to get from each mission, that's going to be pretty random every campaign. The objectives are fairly standardized, right? It's going to be like, it's basically things that happen from fighting. Win battles, take captives, kill enemies, things like that. And so that's going to be your requirements. When you complete it, it gives you that set of blessed units in your recruitment pool. And then, like I said, you can just instantly pull these, like I could instantly spawn these out of here. They don't like regenerate. You have to continue unlocking them through the events that come up. But that is how you acquire blessed spawnings. One interesting thing to know about them is that they all have better bonuses. So let's see if I can look at some, like Saurus Warriors, right? Shielded predatory senses, primal instincts, and 7,650 health. If we go to the Blessed Saurus Warriors with shields, you can see they have more health and they have perfect vigor. So generally speaking, the bonus that a Blessed unit will get is a combination of 3 things, okay? A hit points increase, some bonuses to their type stats, so increase to melee stats for melee infantry, increase to range and missile damage for missile units, increase to charge bonus for cavalry, and so on and so forth. And then the third piece is a unique bonus of some kind. So many of the units, like this one, get a perfect vigor bonus. Some other ones get magic resistance. There's also the Saurus Spears, which for some reason get Forest Strider, which gives them bonuses when they're in the forest. There's also another unit which normally would rampage, the Cold One Spear Riders, but it actually won't rampage when it's the Blessed version. There's a bunch of really specific ones. It's worth looking up the differences for yourself. I actually was able to find a nice post on Reddit from about 2 years ago, which compares them like pretty exactly. It's made by the user, I hope I'm pronouncing it right, Podriog. I'm going to put the link in the description. All credit to this goes to them. And that's going to be the information that you need to. That's everything you need to know about Blessed units, basically. So, with that, I've covered the main racial mechanics for the Lizardmen. Since, like I said, there aren't any mechanics unique to Mazdamundi and Hexoatl, I hope you didn't mind a little review of the Lizardmen racial mechanics in general, or that if you're new to the race, then it's a little introduction to those things as well. With that being said, that should cover everything that I wanted to for the Hexoatl faction of the Lizardmen. One of the great things about starting with a powerful spellcaster is that you can turn battles in your favor even from early on, especially if you focus on that spellcasting line, but it does mean you have to be careful about taking risks with him in battle as well, and you of course then don't really get any help in the actual campaign from the lack of his campaign-focused skills. You even get a penalty to your diplomatic relations for playing this faction, so yeah, there's that. But all being said, it is still a good faction with a pretty strong start on both the Vortex and Mortal Empires campaigns, and if you can make it through some of the early struggles, you actually come out with a very strong position and a very diverse unit roster. There's not much left to say here, so I'll just say thanks for watching, and I hope you learned something new, or this gave you some insight into what this faction is like and why you'd want to play it. If you are enjoying these videos, please remember to like and subscribe as always, and with that, thanks for watching, have a great day, and we'll see you on the next one.